Imagine, just for a moment, a researcher with a clipboard in hand, trying to write an objective field report on something that is, well, completely unobjective. A woman walking into a room. He starts off strong, jotting down, subject enters at a moderate pace. And then, suddenly the room goes quiet. Someone drops a fork, and honestly, his clipboard might as well be a napkin, because no peer-reviewed methodology has ever survived contact with whatever just happened. This, right here, is the problem with trying to study beauty scientifically. Sure, you can measure a heart rate, you can track pupil dilation, you can even record exactly how many conversations stopped mid-sentence. But you simply cannot put a number on the actual experience of watching her cross a room like the room owes her rent. Every instrument eventually fails. Every formula, no matter how robust, breaks down. Which, tells you something important right away. Whatever this is, it was never going to fit inside a spreadsheet. Here's the strangest entry any researcher could ever write in this particular field journal: origin, unknown. And it's not because nobody's looked, it's because there's just no first sighting to point to, no invention date, no founding document. It actually predates the earliest cave paintings, the earliest carved figurines, the earliest scrap of poetry anyone bothered to preserve. Every culture, independently, without ever consulting each other, arrived at the same conclusion: there is just something about a woman fully inhabiting herself that deserves to be recorded, sculpted, sung about, and, honestly, argued over for the rest of human history. That's not coincidence. That's not just some trend convergence. That's about the closest thing to a universal finding that any field of study has ever produced. A result so consistent across every time period and every population studied that, well, any honest researcher would have to call it law, not theory. Every serious field study, sooner or later, runs into an anomaly that just breaks the model. And here's hers. She seems to hold two contradictory properties at the same time, and neither one cancels the other out. She registers as soft, measurable in warmth, in ease, in the way tension visibly leaves a room when she enters it. And yet, at the same time, she also registers as nearly immovable, measurable in how rarely anyone actually manages to push her off whatever she's decided. Most materials in nature pick one, either flexible or strong, but rarely both at full strength, simultaneously. She's the exception that the textbooks conveniently leave out. Researchers who try to force her into a single category keep getting the same result. Incomplete data, returned with a note that basically says, "Try again, you're missing half the picture." She was never confused about this. The confusion has always, honestly, belonged entirely to whoever was holding the clipboard. Long-term studies are where the real findings show up. The kind you only get by tracking a subject over years, not minutes. And, the long-term data is consistent. There's a version of her that doesn't fade with time. If anything, it sharpens. It shows up in subjects who've been dismissed repeatedly and somehow remained open instead of closing off. It shows up in subjects who absorbed disappointment after disappointment and kept choosing softness anyway, like it was a renewable resource instead of a finite one. No researcher has ever successfully replicated this in a lab. You cannot manufacture it with good lighting or a confident outfit. It only appears after a subject has actually been tested by something real and chosen deliberately not to let that testing change who she fundamentally is. The data point is small. The implications are enormous. Here's a finding that should honestly get more attention. None of this data appears out of nowhere. Every subject studied carries traceable variables passed down through generations of women whose individual records were never kept, but whose influence shows up anyway. In posture, in cadence, in the specific tilt of a head during a difficult conversation. This isn't a personality trait researchers can isolate to one individual. It's closer to a transmitted data set, compiled across centuries, expressed in a single face at a single moment in time. You're not looking at an individual result. You're looking at an aggregate, the visible output of every woman in that line who ran the experiment of staying herself and didn't quit. That's not a metaphor research teams use loosely. That's the actual finding. Every single time anyone bothers to look closely enough. So here's how this particular field study has to end. Because there's genuinely no other honest way to close the file. The conclusion was never something the world got to determine. The world was only ever an observer here, taking notes on something that was already true before it started watching. Nobody designed her to pass an external review. Nobody built her to wait on a grant committee's approval before she was allowed to exist fully. She arrived already complete, carrying findings nobody handed her, which means there's no review board that gets to revoke them. She was never a hypothesis waiting on confirmation. She was the conclusion the whole time. We documented this a long time ago. The data hasn't changed since.